We're talking today with William Johnson of Holland, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so Mr. Johnson, start out with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Well, I was born in Union, Mississippi, September 14th, 1936.
All right.
I've lived there until probably between 9 and 11 years.
Okay.
It's been such a long time, I can't remember exactly how old I was.
So what was your family doing for a living in Mississippi?
We had first, when my mom and dad got married, they stayed on my grandparents' farm, and I farmed there for a couple of years. And my dad worked during the winter at a sawmill to save money, because his stepdad gave him 20. Each child got 20 acres of land to farm, and he, being the stepchild, got the worst part of the land to farm. So he worked during the winter to get fertilizer to use on the farm when he started planting, and so it ended up he was the best farmer out of the group, because he was smart enough to use fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that for a couple of years. And then his real father helped him to buy his own farm. Started out with 30, 40 acres, and then each 4 or 5 years added 10, 20, 30, 40, up to ended up with 200 acres of land.
Okay.
We raised corn, cotton, lots of vegetables, truck farming primarily. By that time, he had bought a little truck.
So I was saying 200 acres it would sound to me like a lot for an African American family to
yes,
have. You
definitely.
think 20, 40 acres.
Most black people in that time, and I say black now, but during that time, they were known as Negroes, but the white folks would call them Negroes. Mm-hmm. And it finally got around to, instead of Negroes, it was nigger.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, it was a large farm for a family like that. Okay. You know, most of them were sharecroppers.
Mm-hmm.
And to come to think of it, I think we were the only one in the immediate area that owned the farm land.
Okay. And what were relations like between your father and the white farmers or the suppliers or people he dealt with?
It was very difficult. There was no financial assistance if they needed to buy a piece of equipment. Couldn't get a loan. So most farmers, and my dad was included, used horse and mules to plow, and had a wooden wagon to haul stuff. And if you had a piece of equipment that broken, he'd go to the nearest town to pick it up, and he was waited on at the last person to get waited on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember as a kid, about probably 9 or 10, I went to town with him, and he was standing at the counter waiting to get ordered what he wanted, and a white person walks in, and the clerk says, "Nigger, stand over there, wait till I take care of him." You know, I don't remember how long he waited, but he could have been there all day waiting if someone else kept coming in, a new customer kept coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the way things were back in, late 40s.
Right. Okay. So eventually, your family leaves Mississippi. So how does that come about, and what happens?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the thought process was for my dad, but later on I kind of figured out that he probably thought that he wasn't going to be very successful doing what he was doing because of the animosity,
right,
and difficulty that he had getting support.
Mm-hmm.
So he decided to sell the farm and move to Michigan. We moved to Detroit, in phases. I guess my mom and 2 daughters and 2 little brothers caught the train. Myself and my dad and 2 other brothers, and came up by pickup truck. It was probably mid to late September, and by the time we got to Kentucky area, it started getting cold. You know, you'd hit the top of the truck and get the attention and say, let's switch. Cold, you know, it's too cold back here. So we got to Michigan, and by that time my dad had came up, you know, 6 months or 4 or 5 months earlier and bought a house. So we were immediately housed, and my brothers and I and sisters started school. And because of the school situation in Mississippi, we were all far behind. So by the time I returned 18, I was still trying to get out of high school. I mean, get out of 9th grade.
Yeah.
And so I decided, heck with this, I'll never graduate. So I joined the military.
Okay. Let's fill in a little bit here of the family story. Why did your father pick Michigan?
He had a couple, 3 brothers already in Michigan. And of course, they'd come back down to visit, and he liked what they were saying, you know, about life in Michigan.
Okay. And what kind of work did your father find when he got
When
there?
he got here, he started working for one of the auto manufacturers. He and my 2 older brothers, they all worked at the, I forget the name of the company, but they are no longer existing, out in southeast Michigan.
Okay.
Detroit, south of Detroit.
All right. Okay, so when do you actually enter the military then? What year?
1955, March 28, 1955. In Detroit, there's a little Army base, Fort Wayne, Fort Wayne, Michigan. I caught the bus from my house and went to Fort Wayne and spent the first night there, and they process you in and send you off to another processing station, which was Fort Knox, Kentucky. 2 days later, we were in Fort Knox, and that's where you get all your equipment issued, clothing, get your hair cut, no hair on your head, pretty much. From there, I took my first plane ride to Fort Campbell, Fort Carson, Colorado. Took basic training.
Okay. Now, why did you choose the Army?
Well, I had 2 brothers that had been in the Korean War. They were home, and my older brother was in World War II. He was on a ship going to Japan. He was part of the occupation force. He spent a couple of years over there, and then he got out. So, you know, Army was, I didn't know anybody that had been in the Navy or the Air Force.
Okay, so that was what you knew.
So that's what I knew about the service.
All right. And did your brothers have basically a positive view of the service, or?
Yeah, they did. They did. One was a tanker, and one was a truck driver, pickup. I mean, a 2.5
Deuce and a half, yeah.
Yeah, deuce and a half. And yeah, they had a good experience in the Army. They both were drafted, so they spent 2 years, and they both went to Korea.
All right. Then, so you go down, okay, Fort Carson, Colorado is where you do your basic training. Okay, describe that experience. What was that like?
That was exciting to me, because before I went in, I figured that whatever I faced, I was going to do exactly my best, you know. And so it was exciting, and everything that we were taught, you know, I was pretty well successful doing and following the instructions, and I didn't make honor graduate at the end of the training, but I was up there, and pleased with my accomplishment, really.
All right. Now, how
because you do stuff that you didn't think you would ever be able to do.
Okay. Were you in pretty good physical shape when you went in?
Oh yeah. Before I went in, I wasn't in very good shape. I was weighing 136 pounds, and I don't know, but I did all the physical training that they required, and I was well trained.
Okay. And in general, how did the drill sergeants treat you?
Well, at Fort Carson, drill sergeants were very good, and they treated us all equal, and no real problems with anyone. And you got to know a lot of guys and where they were from, and the one thing that got me was a lot of them would talk about their father had been in World War II or in the military, and of course my father never was in the military, and I kind of felt lost, you know, wasn't part of that. But then I knew I had brothers that was in Korea, so you know, it was good.
All right. Now, how much emphasis was there on discipline and following orders?
Oh, very much so, very much so. And you know, the drill sergeant would tell you something, and he'd say, "Everybody understand that?" And everybody would yell, "Yes, Sergeant." So he was requiring you to understand what he was saying and express that to him.
Right.
That you understood it.
Okay. And did you get into trouble yourself?
In basic, not really. I had another soldier, as we would say, picking on me. And one evening I caught him into the latrine, that's the restroom, you know, and he and I was the only one in there, and I attacked him and knocked him down, and I had no more trouble with that guy. So he didn't bother me anymore after that.
All right. But you didn't get in trouble with the sergeants or anything like that?
No, he didn't tell, and I didn't tell.
Right.
That was the first case of don't tell.
Yeah, so don't ask, don't tell. There you go.
Don't tell.
Yeah, a little bit different. Okay, so how long was basic training?
8 weeks
Okay.
at Fort Carson. Then
Right.
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for another 8 weeks of training, advanced training.
Okay, and what kind of training were you getting there?
At Fort Leonard Wood, we was getting training on how to lay mines, how to build bridges. It was the engineer
training.
outfit.
Yeah. Okay.
And the word got out that we were getting close to the end of the 8 weeks training, and the word was passed that the whole outfit was going to be staying at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, joining the 18th Engineer Brigade. And nobody wanted to stay at Fort Leonard Wood because they had one little town with one stop sign. So most of us volunteered to go to airborne training. There was a recruiter up there came in, and we all sitting in the theater listening to his spiel and watching some films. And by the time he finished the film session and talking, half of the class signed up to go to airborne training.
Okay.
So we went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and joined the 11th Airborne Division and went to jump school right there at Fort Campbell.
Now, I want to back up again just a little bit. The Army sorts out where they want to send people, and usually if they're sending you to the engineers, they're assuming you have a certain level of aptitude or something for that. Do you have any idea why they sent you to the engineers rather than just infantry?
No, I don't, because I didn't know anything. No, nothing about engineering. I guess they send you where they need you.
Yeah. Well, I guess even the farm equipment you worked
Well,
with,
yeah.
would have been something. So you have
Some basic knowledge of tools and stuff. So.
But they must have thought something good about you if they're sending you there, because they don't send stupid people there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So you go, okay, but then you decide that Fort Leonard Wood's not for you, so off to airborne. So how did the jump school work?
You had 3 weeks of jump school. First week was basically physical training, and training about the parachute and how you put it on, how you jump out the door, and but most of it was physical training because you need to be in good physical condition. The parachute was pretty heavy. You had two on, one in the back and one on in your front, a reserve. So the first week was, like I say, physical training mostly, and introduction to the techniques that they were going to use to train you. Second week, you started jumping out of a tower with the parachute on, hooked to a cable that ran down 100 yards, 200 yards to a mound. It gives you an idea of coming down through the air with the parachute on. And so you did that for 2 weeks, 1 week, and the next week you're jumping out of the airplane. You know, by that time, they've taught you all the techniques to use, how to jump out, what you do when you do jump out. You look up at your canopy as it opens after you count to 4,000, up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and you look up, and if your parachute is open, you reach up and grab the lines and help guide it to where you want to go. And so that went well. And we always say the first jump, you don't know what the heck you're doing. You're just there. And you jump out and hoping that everything goes well. By the time the fifth jump, you know, you think you're expert at it. But my fifth jump, and the fifth jump mostly is most of the time is at night. I jumped, my parachute open partially. I look up, and it's what we call a May West. Static line is over in the middle of the parachute, so it's divided in two bubbles. So I started looking around, and I think I said something vulgar. Oh shit! And so I pulled the parachute as a reserve. By the time the reserve opened up, slowed me down. I hit the ground, you know. But after that, that was the only incident I ever had making a parachute jump. And I made a total of probably 260 total through my career.
All right. So you finished jump school, and then what happens to you?
This was finished in late September, October. In December, the entire 11th Airborne Division went to Germany in different increments. Got on a train, went to New York, got on a boat, took 9 days to cross the ocean, and went to Germany. On the ship, a lot of the troops got sick, seasick. So when I went on, I knew that people would get seasick. I asked one of the crew members, I said, what can you do to keep from getting seasick? He says, when the ship's door opens, go down and get you a box of saltine crackers. It's when your stomach starts feeling a little oozy, eat a few crackers. So that's what I did. I didn't get sick. Most people did. You go to a dining hall and you got long tables and everybody sit down with their tray, and if you don't hold on to your tray when the ship rocks, your tray's gonna go down, and when it comes back, you don't know what's gonna be on it, you know? Could be some of your food, or all of your food, or all of your food and somebody else's food, you know, where he got sick. Yeah. So after we got to Germany, landed in Bremerhaven, Germany, and went to Munich, Germany. Part of the division was in Augsburg, part was in Munich, and a couple other small towns around that area.
Okay.
We were in the 11th Airborne Division was training, always training, and having a good time. At some point, too much of a good time. So the division got deactivated, and we became part of the 24th Infantry Division.
Okay. Can you explain the too much of a good time part?
Oh.
What were you guys doing?
Well, we liked the good German beer too much, the good German Fräuleins, and some got, well, a lot of fight between different groups. Different groups, I mean, a regular airborne unit and a non-airborne unit. The non-airbornes were called legs. Airborne units didn't like legs because during the basic, during jump school, they told you a paratrooper could beat any legs anywhere in the world. You can take on 5 and come out ahead, and a lot of the guys believe that. So we got people that go to training, live fire training. In one case, a kid brought a hand grenade back and threw it in a bar. So after that, division was deactivated.
Okay, so you were just a little too, their training worked too well.
Yeah, training was too good in some instances.
Okay, what was the racial climate like at that point in the Army units?
Well, in the Army, in the unit, it was okay, you know, no real problems. But when you left the base, going downtown or anywhere, it was segregated, you know, where even the bars in town, you got to know where you could go, and if you went to the wrong place, you might get beat up, you know. So, because we all come from back here in the States, and we had different ideas about things.
So you brought that with you. Did the Germans seem to care, or did they treat you all pretty much the same?
Oh, they treated us pretty much the same, but they had names for us, you know. And they said I was like an Oreo, you know, black on the outside but white on the inside, you know. I don't know why they called me that, you know. I'm sure it was more than just me.
Yeah, I mean, in the more recent American sense, there's different views of that. But part of it was, I get the impression you could probably work with or get along with pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
So you might not have fit the stereotype so well.
Right. That's probably it.
And that confused them a little bit.
Yeah. So they didn't know where I was, you know.
All right. Now, how long did you stay in Germany?
Stayed in Germany we left Fort Campbell, end of December, got to Germany late January, the entire division. We stayed there until December 58.
Yeah. Okay. And then the latter part of it now, your unit has become part of the 24th Division.
Right.
Or the 8th Division, 24th Regiment.
Right.
Yeah. Instead. Okay.
Then I go to Fort Bragg from there.
Once you switched to the other unit, did you lose your airborne designation?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll say when you're in an airborne unit, you are paid $55 a month, and you had to jump every 3 months. But after the 11th was deactivated, the airborne status discontinued.
Yep.
Until you join another airborne unit.
Right. So for the time being, you were a leg.
Yeah, I was the leg.
After all of that. Now, while you were in Germany, did you get to travel around at all or see much of Europe?
Well, went to Paris a couple of times. After I was there for a year and a half, maybe 2, I bought a car. I was the only lower enlisted person with a car. And it was a 1953 Mercedes. Nice car. And I drove to Paris twice with another friend, a white guy. He and I was pretty good friends. And we went there once with a tour group of guys and their wives. And while there, he and I kind of split away from the group and went down to Rue Pigalle, you know, and enjoyed that scenery. Anyway, the day we were leaving, we all got on the bus. Well, we came home, he came to the hotel late. He and I was sitting out on the sidewalk having a last beer. And we all got on the bus, and the driver was going to leave, and the manager of the hotel come out. Okay, need you to know who was in room blah blah. And Sims and I raised our hand. Said, could we see your luggage? Goes out and opens our luggage. He opens his, no problem. I open mine. There are all the towels from the hotel in my luggage. Yeah. So they took the towels.
Now, did you put the towels in your
No, I
luggage?
didn't put the towels in my
Your
luggage.
roommate did.
My roommate did. But, you know, we didn't get too upset about that. They took the towels and we were on our way.
All right.
The next time we went to Paris, we drove my car, and we were having a good time, and I lost my wallet somewhere, my little driver's license, my leave papers, and so we went to the embassy, and they said, well, maybe you better go stop at the local police department and let them know what happened. And so they said, the police says, well, the thing you have to do now is go back to Germany. So we left a little sooner than we wanted to, but everything worked out.
All right. Well, yeah, Paris is known to have pickpockets.
Oh, yeah.
Then and now.
During that time, there was a war going on between the French and the Algerians. And a lot of Algerian nationals would be out on the street, and they wanted to buy anything you had. They could buy your dirty clothes, whatever, because they were supplying their people back home. But yeah.
All right. So now, are there other things from that tour in Germany that stand out for you, or things that happened with you?
Yeah. Since we were airborne unit, near the barracks we were living in was a large open field. So we had about 500, maybe 600 troops spread out across the beginning of this open area, double arm length apart, and we walked for about a mile looking for big rocks, anything dangerous that a trooper might make a jump and land on, fall. One of the guys found part of an old German rifle, just the metal, the barrel, and some of the mechanisms. Anyway, we took it back to the barracks, and he was down. We had a workroom downstairs in the basement. He was down there, and I walk in, and he says, Bill Johnson, he was from Memphis, Tennessee. Bill Johnson, would you take this cleaning rod? You see that cleaning rod that's stuck in the rifle? He had it in the vise, right? He says, I'm going to put my hand here and see if, when you hit it, I'm going to see if whatever's stuck in there was going to come out. I hit it one time and bam! There was a round. He lost his middle finger.
Oh.
So Walter Jones, from that point on, we called him Four Fingers, you know. But yeah, it was a good tour. A lot of good training. Sometimes we had to go 80 miles away for a training facility, a place called Hohenfels, and it was a real muddy place, you know. But I had a lot of good training.
Okay. All right. Now, how long was your original enlistment for?
The original enlistment was for 4 years, because when I took the exam, I scored lower than average. So in order to enter the service, they tack on an extra year.
Okay.
You know,
So
they'll give you the time to train you.
something like that.
You know.
But you seem to have trained pretty well, pretty quickly, so that worked.
Yeah, that worked out okay.
Now, when you first enlisted, were you thinking of making a career in the Army, or just doing one hitch and then going on to something else?
After basic training, you know, I was so indoctrinated into the discipline and surrounding of the, you know, camaraderie. I thought about staying more than just one tour, even that early.
All right. And now, At what point then did you decide to re-enlist? Was that while you were still in Germany, or?
No, after I got back to Fort Bragg
Mm-hmm.
in '59, I re-enlisted.
Okay. All right. So at Fort Bragg, what unit were you with?
I was with the 504 82nd Airborne Division.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, training was the word, you know, always training. And 59. Okay, yeah, and at one point, the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on,
Mm-hmm.
happening. By that time, I was married, I had one child, and I was living on base in quarters. So President Kennedy was making a speech about the missile crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians had missiles in Cuba, and we were going to quarantine the island, right? So I told my wife, I says, I'm going upstairs and put my clothes on because I will be going to the unit in any minute. And before the president got off the TV, the phone rang and says, report to the unit, you know. So the next day we organized and got on planes and went to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And we were ready, you know. They issued us ammunition, gave us shots, and we sat on the wing of the aircraft in the shade
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of days, you know, until the Russians decided to take their missiles out. Before that or after that, the 82nd was involved in domestic problem in Mississippi. So we went to Mississippi to there was an individual from the Air Force veteran,
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go to the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss,
Mm-hmm.
and people didn't want him there, and the governor, Ralph Barnett, the governor, says he couldn't attend the university. So the 82nd and the 101st, and plus a couple of military units and the 2nd Infantry Division out of Fort Benning, part of it went to Mississippi. And there, the federal government got involved and decided that if I was on Columbus Air Force Base reservation, and they were going to send troops into town, into the university. And at one point they said, you know, our captain says, okay, Sergeant Johnson, Sergeant such and such, I want you to tell all your black troops that they're not going to be involved in this operation. And you talk about a bunch of pissed off people.
Mm-hmm.
So wait a minute, you know, in a lot of units, most of their leaderships, platoon leaders, platoon sergeants, squad leaders, were black soldiers, you know. So they were going off with half of their leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a book I have that a guy wrote later on about that, and I didn't know, nobody knew why, who gave the word.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the division commander there on the ground in Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
or from the Pentagon. But later on, found out it was the president and Kassenbach, the chief of staff,
Mm-hmm.
decided that they didn't want to have black guys out there with long guns facing the white guys.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but really that was a sad case, you know, for most of the people in the division,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want to be split up like
Yeah.
that, you know. But
Okay,
so it only lasted about 5-6 days, and we started withdrawing back to
Right.
Fort Bragg.
Yeah. So it was James Meredith, I think.
James Meredith was the individual's
was the man
name.
who
Yeah.
did it. Yeah. Okay. So you were a distant witness to that event. They
Oh,
didn't let
yeah.
you go.
Yeah, yeah. We went. I was in Mississippi, but
Okay.
once we were there,
Mhm.
you know, we couldn't participate,
Okay.
except at the end, you know, they finally reneged up in Washington and said, okay, disregard that.
Okay.
You know, but by that time things were quieting down. You know, a lot of folks were arrested, and so we left there and came back to Fort Bragg.
All right. And so now, how long then do you stay at Fort Bragg?
Left Fort Bragg sometime in December, I think it was, of 59.
Okay.
No, 63.
Yeah.
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 63.
Because you were still at Fort Bragg at the time
Yeah.
of the Cuban Missile Crisis
Yeah.
in '62.
Yeah.
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 You'd be there for that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And then what unit do you go to next?
I get an assignment to go to Germany, the 8th Infantry Division, 509th Airborne Infantry Brigade. And so I go there and I stay until '66. Part of my assignment was go from the 509th. I went to division headquarters as part of the Inspector General team, where a group of individuals that are trained in certain fields go out to inspect all the other units within the division. My job was for physical security and classified documents. Physical security would mean that I checked on the security of all the weapons, ammunition, storage units, and at that time there was a new directive out that we had to check on this particular type of weapon, which they call a COFRAM, which meant COFRAM was controlled fragmentation ammunition. And we saw the results of that during the Iraqi war, where planes dropped little cluster bombs and they blast out. You know, one bomb, it contains many, many more bombs.
Right.
You know, so that was the beginning of that exercise. You know, and I didn't know what it was totally, what it was about, until the Iraq War. And I said, oh crap, that's what that is. Anyway, so I did that until 1966, and got orders to go to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay. So, and then this tour in Germany, where were you based?
I was in Mainz, Germany, and then I went to Bad Kreuznach, which was about 25 miles away. That was the division headquarters.
Okay. Did you have your family with you?
I did. I had 3 kids by then.
Okay.
2 girls, no, a girl and a boy and a girl, a set of twins.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So how did your family like being in Germany?
They liked it. I'm sure, you know, they missed the kids missed their friends, the wife missed the relatives, and but she got a job over there and worked for the base that I was working on for a nonprofit organization that ran clubs and stuff like that. But it was interesting.
And did
good.
they have they have American schools on the base
Yeah.
and that kind of thing?
Right.
So there were American kids at least to
yeah.
hang out with.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. All right. Now, by this time, now we're getting into the mid '60s.
Right.
The Vietnam War
66.
is heating up, and all of this. Were men starting to switch out and go to Vietnam?
Oh yeah. A lot of the guys left Germany and went directly to Vietnam. You know, I had 3 friends I know of, three guys that worked for me over there. 2 of them got killed after being there less than a month, you know. And so when I left Germany, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Knowing that I was going to be going to Vietnam, I started taking some Vietnamese language training. You know? And I got to be pretty good to understand and to speak, you know, ask the questions that I needed to ask, you know. Except when I got to Vietnam, I was interviewing a prisoner, and I come up against the word that I wanted to use, and I couldn't think of it Vietnamese-wise. I started speaking German. He looked at me and like totally puzzled. Later I thought I should have been speaking French, you know, because that French had been there, and he may have understood French better than Germany.
Right, but you can have that instinct where you're speaking in a foreign language, and so you just shift into the foreign language you know best.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of thing can happen to you. All right. Now, what did your wife and family think about your going to Vietnam?
Well, they were a little, well, expected, you know, because everyone around me was going in and coming back to Vietnam. Some coming, not coming back. So we were in Georgia. My wife was going to school, a business school, and before I left Fort Bragg, Fort Benning, she was going downtown to this business school, and more than once she would call me and says, "I got a flat tire." So, come to find out, there was some young white boys, I guess, going to that school, didn't like the idea that she was going to the school also. They would prop nails behind the tire and in front of the tire, you know, just jam it in there where it wouldn't fall. Doesn't matter which way she went, she was going to get a flat tire, you know. So that happened a couple of times, and finally I'd have to go down and change the tire, and either get a repair or. So finally I went in and talked to the school people and told them what was going on, but they found out who was doing it, and eventually, you know, kicked them out of school. But she wanted to stay there, so I made arrangement. Well, first of all, after I got orders, family could stay on the base in the quarters they were in, because 2 doors down there was a family with 3 kids. I got to know them and heard the wife and the kids, but I never did see the husband. I asked her one day, I said, "So where's your husband? You know, where does he work? You know, what outfit is he in?" She said, "Oh, he 2 years ago he went to Ohio to see his kids, and while he was up there, he killed his ex-wife, and he's in prison." You know, and I'm thinking I should be able to keep my family on base since they've been here for 2 years, and he's in prison. I requested through the base that allow my family to remain there while I was in Vietnam for a year. Of course, they came back and said no. And I said, "Wait a minute, this is what's happening. This family is here, been here for 2 years. I know because I've been here almost 2 years." And said, "Well, no, that can't happen. That can't happen." I said, "It's happening." So they called back. The colonel called me and says, "Would you come up and need to talk to you?" He said, "Yeah, I guess that's going on. Somebody messed up. They didn't catch it because he wasn't in the military anymore."
Right.
You know, but you still can't keep your wife, keep your family there. So I found an apartment off base, and she wanted to stay on base for 30 days. I said, okay. Then she was going to move to the apartment later after I left. I get to Vietnam 3 or 4 weeks later, maybe a month, 6 weeks. I get a letter, and instead of going to the apartment, she goes to dealer and buy a mobile home, puts it in this park, and everything was going okay until 3 or 4 more weeks, 2 months or so. Get a letter that said the Ku Klux Klan burned a cross in our yard, you know. And I'm thinking, by this time I'm the platoon sergeant of a recon platoon with 42, 44 people, and I'm thinking, why the hell am I over here with this going on with my family, you know? And so I called her and talked to her, and she said, you know, we're okay, but you know, that's what happened, and nothing since then. Anyway, during this next 2-3 weeks, I started getting terrible headaches, and what reason from what, I don't know. The doctor says, well, maybe it's something out in the jungle that makes your sinuses swell and you can't get any relief, you know. So one day I just about passed out, and they evacuated me to a hospital, and and ran a bunch of tests, and they said, yeah, your sinus is totally swollen and lots of pressure, you know. And I'm in the hospital one morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning. The nurse wakes me up, you know. Says, Sergeant Johnson, wake up, wake up. I said, for what? I said, I got to give you a sleeping pill. I said, damn, I'm already asleep. Why are you waking me? I don't need a sleeping pill. I'm asleep. The best sleep I've had in 4 months. You know, so she was upset because I was yelling at her, you know, but that's the way I felt, you know.
All right. Now, we've run a little bit ahead of ourselves here in the story. When you would come back from Germany, you go to Fort Benning, were you getting additional training or preparation to go to Vietnam, or what was happening there?
Yeah, I was, at that point, I was the operations sergeant at the Airborne Training School.
Okay.
And our job was to process and care for the students that were coming in to go to that school. And so I was the operations sergeant, and training schedule, writing schedule, and scheduling units, so where they go, where and when, you know.
And what rank did you have at that point?
At that time, I got promoted there to E7.
Okay.
Sergeant First Class, E7. And there was a lot of guys that had been at that school for 6, 7, 8 years. And when I got promoted, they were upset because here I am, newcomer, and I get promoted ahead of them. But I had been in assignments that, you know, I performed well in. And by this time, the promotion system was such that you, as a commander, submit people to the Pentagon to be promoted. And you have to write the reason and why you think that this person needs to be promoted immediately, as soon as possible, you know. So that's the way the system was working. And, you know, and they gave you the history of your service, the background, you know, where you've been, what have you done. And these guys have been in the school doing the same thing, you know, not doing anything different.
And you've had some pretty important assignments, and you'd been overseas for 2 tours and all of that kind of stuff. So, so there was a lot that went into that at that point. But now, did you have the option to stay at the school, or did you know that that was just temporary?
I knew it was temporary. I didn't particularly want to stay there. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
So I went to Vietnam, and the colonel talked to us and says, there was 2 of us, E7s. Says, you going to the recon platoon, and so are you going. We had 2 separate platoons, right? One 42 men, 44 men, you know.
So that's over in Vietnam once you get, okay.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit now. When do you get orders to go to Vietnam?
Well, in, let's see, mid-March, April, I think, probably April, May.
Okay.
Yeah.
67?
67.
Okay. All right. And then what's the process to get you to Vietnam?
Well, you know, you take care of your family, you sign the necessary paperwork so she can act in your absence in any way, shape, or form, and then you clear the post and away you go. Catch a plane and go to. In my case, I had 3 brothers living in the San Francisco area, so I go to San Francisco for 2 days and see my brothers, and then go to Seattle, Washington, and that's where I catch a plane and go to Vietnam.
All right.
We land in Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, and from there to Vietnam.
Okay.
Cam Ranh Bay.
Okay, you land at Cam Ranh Bay. All right. And do you come in during the day or at night?
During the day, early morning, well, mid-morning.
Okay. And what's your first impression of Vietnam?
Hot.
And you're from Mississippi.
Yeah, and I'm from Mississippi, but it was hot and humid, you know.
All right.
And you see troops, soldiers walking, doing their job, you know. And I'm thinking, well, they can do it, I can, you know.
All right. So you land, and do they give you any kind of orientation for Vietnam once you arrive?
No, they send us to wherever we were going. I went to Cam Ranh, Van Rang, which was north of Saigon, about a couple hundred miles, or maybe, I don't know for sure. But anyway, I went to Fan Ring, and that's where the headquarters for the 101st was.
Okay.
You know, and they give you a week and a half of training.
Mm-hmm.
You even go out on patrol, so they teach you about the surrounding areas, how you,
Mm-hmm.
how the jungle is, and how you can walk and not be able to see 5 yards off the trail, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a week of that, and firing the weapon, train you on the weapon, because that was right at the time where the M16 was introduced
Mm-hmm.
to Vietnam, and a lot of folks were having problems. Even before I went, they were reporting problems with the M16 jamming
Mm-hmm.
during the inappropriate times.
Yes.
You know, when you're firing at someone. So after that, you know where you're going, what unit, and they send you out by helicopter to join the unit. I get off the helicopter, and the rest of the platoon is about 100 yards away, and somebody come over to the helicopter and gets me and escorts
Mm-hmm.
me over to the company or the commander.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way over, some sniper up in the hills firing at me. I said, damn, these guys trying to kill me already.
Mm-hmm.
I just get off the helicopter. Anyway, I joined the unit, and the captain of the company
Mm-hmm.
was running the platoon that I was
And
with.
which battalion were you joining?
I was 2nd Battalion, 502nd.
Okay. All right. And so now you're coming into this. You've had a lot of experience in the Army, but none in Vietnam,
No.
and none with jungle warfare, anything else like this.
Well, I went to jungle warfare training school in Panama
Okay, so you did do that.
for 2 weeks.
Okay.
You know,
So
and
what
you
would-
learn how to survive in the jungle. You know, things that you can find to eat if you get separated from yourself. You know, people.
But you hadn't been to Vietnam.
No, I hadn't been to Vietnam. I hadn't had anybody shooting real bullets at me.
Okay. Now you're a platoon sergeant for the recon platoon.
Right.
And a reconnaissance platoon, so basically that's for the whole battalion,
Right.
essentially, and they
Right.
operate pretty much independently.
Independent of the companies, any other companies.
Yeah, and do they
And-
work in small groups?
Well, we, under normal circumstances, would be small groups,
Mhm.
but in this case, because you're operating out away independent of
Mhm.
company,
Mhm.
they kept us together for
Okay.
the most part.
All right,
30, 40, 45 people.
all right. And you're going in here, so you don't have any experience. How did you approach your job, or how did you try to learn from the other guys?
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah, the sergeants that were squad leaders, you know, I talked to them when the opportunity came in the evening when we stopped to set up a defensive position, you know, and find out how things have been going and what techniques, special techniques you use
Mhm.
to stay safe
all right.
during the darkness.
Mhm.
And one of the things we would do is in the evening, just before dark, we'd stop if we got a resupply of supplies, rations.
Mhm.
That particular time, we'd stop, break down all the ration issued out to the individuals,
Mhm.
and stack the boxes up and burn them, or sometimes leave them there
Mhm.
and leave that position just before, right at dark,
Mhm.
and go down 200 yards away and set up position. Because eventually, I mean, you spent enough time there that if anybody around, they know you're
Mhm.
there. So when it gets a little dark, they can't see very good, you know, at a distance, you can move. That prevents you being ambushed at
Mhm.
night in that position. And a lot of times you leave a squad where you got resupplied, and if the VC comes scrambling, ramming through your leftovers,
Mhm.
you know, you take care of them, you know.
Right.
So stuff like that
Okay.
you learn from the individuals that had already been there.
Okay. Now, did you have a platoon, an officer as platoon leader?
Off and on, yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time, I was the guy.
You were in charge.
One time, I mean, I got a call that says, you having a 06? Not an 06, but I forget what they call him. Going to be landing, taking over.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. So anyway, we got the lieutenant in, and I introduced myself, and I says, did they give you a map, Lieutenant, when you left the CP? No, Sergeant. I says, okay, I have the map. When I give you the map, you're in charge. And otherwise, you just stick with me.
Okay.
You know, because you don't want to introduce him to the action right away. Let him get his feet on the ground.
Okay. Now, what kind of terrain were you operating in? Was it mountains, jungle, swampy? Okay, yeah.
Mountains, mountainous, nothing real mountainous, but hills and anywhere you went was pretty much jungle. Because but on the other hand, you had trails, no roads to speak of, but trails where the local VC or the local population used. That's the way they get around and go from point to point through a trail. There's no roads.
Now, would you use the trails yourself or stay off them?
Yeah, we used the trails. Yeah, and the most of the time, the VC would make a signal, use the little rocks or sticks, tie them together, and one pointing in the right particular direction. You know, that's where it tells the guy, when you get to this point, go that way. You know, and so we pick up on that, and you know, you find information on the trails, so that's why we use the trail. But sometimes you have to go right straight through the jungle, and in order to do that, you got to have a couple people up front with machetes, whacking your way through.
Yeah,
and that's so noisy.
I guess sometimes, though, in some areas, trails would be booby trapped.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could be ambushed
Oh,
there.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so,
yeah. So you have a point man. Every time you move, you have a point man and a slack man. That means the guy that's covering the point man. But the point man is quite a ways out, and he'd see anything. And the saying was, point man better be alive or he is dead, you know. So we had this one kid that was a point man. We call him Tennessee. Every time we move, he wanted to be the point. We get to a location, and we had to go to where the battalion, battalion headquarters was. So when we got there, the colonel wanted me to send 3 people with a radio relay station up on a mountain to increase the radio communications. So I thought, Tennessee's been out on point so long, he needs a break, you know. So I told him that he and 2 other guys were going on the radio relay station. So they get up there in a big storm, and a couple of days later, a big storm comes through, and they were, I guess, apparently too close to the antenna. Lightning strike kills Tennessee.
oh, wow.
So you blame yourself in a way, but on the other hand, you're thinking you're giving the guy a break, getting a relief from doing what he normally does.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And there are just some things you simply can't control.
Yeah. Right.
And it would have been somebody.
Oh yeah. Didn't matter. It wouldn't have made any difference who it was. Somebody was going to be there. You know. And that was the same time this news people came by and wanted to talk to me and interview me and what we were doing, and I just basically ignored them, you know.
Okay. Now, had they come because of the lightning strike, or
I don't know. That's why I didn't want to talk to them about it, you know.
All right. Now, you did not spend. How long do you think you spent actually in the field with your unit?
With the unit, probably 2 months
Okay.
at the most.
And then at that point, you had the other problems. You
Yeah,
had to
with the
leave
problem
the field.
with the home,
Yeah.
back home, and my headaches. Had my medic was feeding me Darvons, which was a painkiller
Yeah.
we used over there, and at one point it just got to the point where I couldn't function.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. So once you get through that, where were you, when you were in the hospital? Where were you?
I was in I was
Quinnon?
in Tam-Kee.
Tam-Kee. Okay.
Yeah, Tam-Kee, and either Tam-Kee or Chu Lai.
It might have been Chu Lai because Chu Lai was a bigger base.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was in Tam-Kee first, and then went to Chu Lai after that, because at Chu Lai is where the colonel decided I wouldn't go back out to the recon platoon. I would stay at the battalion as the S2 sergeant, because the S2 sergeant was getting ready to leave, rotate. He was a friend of mine that we've known each other for many years, you know. So he was going to go back home, and I was going to take his place.
Okay. Now explain what an S2 does.
S2 is, he gathers intelligence information from the units out in the field and try to evaluate and determine exactly what the enemy is doing, and post that and brief the colonel, the commander, and whether he takes actions.
Right. Okay. So
or
you're
not.
you're
You know, give him the information.
You're the intelligence officer.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Or sergeant in this case.
Right.
All right. Now, and was that at Chu Lai or was that somewhere else?
That was Chu Lai.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and this is now the fall of '67.
Yeah.
We've gotten into.
In probably early April, March.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No. Yeah, fall,
Yeah,
November.
right.
Yeah, because we left for Chu Lai and went back to Phan Rang,
Okay.
and for Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And from Phan Rang, we spent 4 or 5 days there. And at that time, the S2 officer, Captain Anderson was his name, we had the officers, well, we had Quonset huts, you know, wooden buildings, where the troops would have sleep and, you know, live. Anyway, Captain Anderson was cleaning his weapon, and in a room next to him was an S2 communications officer. So he takes his .45 out, right? Pulls the slide to the rear and let it go forward, and takes the clip out. Pulls the trigger, goes through the wall, hits the communications officer in the chest and kills him.
Wow.
You know, no problem. He was the S2 officer, and after that stand down, you know, it had an investigation and it determined it was just a freaking accident. And so they took Captain Anderson out of the S2 and made him the commander of Charlie Company. So we went from Phan Rang to Song Bay, which was south, just north of Saigon. This is just before the Tet Offensive.
Right.
You know, so we were still in Song Bay, and Captain Anderson was approaching his date of rotation back to the States. He was walking around the perimeter, saying goodbye to his troops, and he was walked across a trail. Down the trail was a VC, saw him, shot him, killed him right there.
Oh.
You know, I thought, man, how crazy is that?
Yeah.
You know, he accidentally kills a guy, and the last day he's in the field, he gets killed.
Okay. Now, during this time when you're with the 101st and before the Tet Offensive, how common was contact with the enemy?
Quite frequently, small contact. You know, squad every now and then.
Okay. And were they mostly Viet Cong at this point, or were you seeing North Vietnamese regulars?
VC,
Okay.
mostly,
All
VC.
right. Now, as the Tet Offensive approached, were you getting any indications that there was more enemy activity or something might be happening?
No.
Okay.
No, nothing.
Not where you were?
No,
All right.
because at that time things were pretty quiet. I think the NVA was back over by Laos and Cambodia, you know, because they used the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's the way they came down, and and made their way inland without being discovered.
Right.
So when the Tet Offensive started, we left Song Bay and went to Saigon, got on the LST, transport boat.
Landing ship tank.
Yeah,
right. The big flat bottom transport, old World War II things.
So we go to Da Nang, all the way up the coast to Da Nang, which was quite a trip. Anyway, while we were waiting to load the LST, we were sitting, guys were sitting on with the rucksacks on against a bunch of Carnex containers, you know, big metal containers that they used to send supplies overseas. And one of the guys got up when he was getting ready to leave, and when he got up, the pressure off the Carnex container, the door flew open, and it was filled with Johnny Walker whiskey.
Oops.
And I didn't know it until later, you know, so half the guys was halfway drunk by the time we got midway between Saigon and Da Nang. And so the word was out, anybody that had alcohol, you better throw it overboard, you know.
Okay. Now, when the Tet Offensive first began, did your unit or base get attacked, or was it quiet where you were?
It was attacked. Well, we went from Song Bay to Benoit, which was the original home base for the 101st, and that's not too far from Saigon.
Yeah.
So we got word that there was action west of Saigon.
Okay.
So we went down and got on the LST and went north. They already had enough troops in Saigon.
But at Song Bay, you didn't get attacked.
No, we didn't.
All right.
No.
All right.
So we go to Da Nang and stay at Da Nang a couple of 3 days. My wife's boyfriend at that time was stationed at Da Nang. She keeps asking me, did I see such and such? I said, no, if I did, I wouldn't have known him in the first place. Anyway, we stayed there and we started sending out patrols. It was Marble Mountain? Yeah,
Marble Mountain was there,
yeah. And there was a Haivon Pass, and every time the Marine tried to send a convoy to Phu or Wei to get attacked. So we were operating out of there for a while, a couple, 3-4 weeks, and then we moved from there to just south of Wei.
Okay.
And from there we went out west towards Ashau Valley. We started moving that way, and the Marine Corps the Marines were pretty much taking Wei on the under control, and finding so many dead bodies and a huge mass grave just west of Wei, you know. So.
And that was a place where the local Viet Cong had rounded up various people they did not like.
Everybody
and
they
killed
didn't
them.
like and didn't know, that knew that where they worked and what they did. Anyway, so we were out about 15 miles west of Wei at we relieved a Marine unit that was operating and ran that area. But they left and we took up same positions, and every position it was just left as the old Vietnamese easy, beaucoup, so much ammunition, grenades and small arms ammunition, and mud, and we cleaned that up. And so I was with the colonel one day, and we went down to the helipad to meet a helicopter coming in. The division commander was coming in. So we go down and meet the division commander and the sergeant major, and the sergeant major was talking to me. He says, Sergeant Johnson says, can't you get the starch fatigues out here? I said, Sergeant Major, I'm glad to get clean fatigues. I mean, this was a guy that's been in garrison forever.
Yeah.
Talking about starch fatigues. But anyway, about a week later, a fire base about 5 miles away gets bombed, aircraft. Some of the aircraft that come in from the north, they had certain places that they would drop their ammunition, didn't want to land with it, right? And nobody told them there was a fire base there. So they lost a handful of people killed and some wounded, more wounded. So the colonel and I could get in a helicopter and go down there and see if we could do help any way, shape, or form. So we sent some communications equipment to reestablish, communications there.
So this was the North Vietnamese resupplying their units
No,
in the field, or your own people were dropping resupply?
Right.
Okay.
They had been bombing up north.
Yeah.
And on their way back, they would pick a place to drop their whatever was left.
Right. Okay. So it's the leftover bombs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so somebody forgot to inform them that there was an army unit there. So
yeah,
things happen.
That would be a
Shit
problem.
happens, as they say.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Certainly does. Okay.
So from there we go from the rock pile, I think they call it. We go from there west towards Ashaw Valley and set up fire base Bastogne. You probably heard of
I have heard of
Bastogne.
that, yes.
Yeah. So Bastogne, we were there, and then we went to Vega, which was even further west into Ashaw, near the Ashaw. And we stayed there 4 weeks or so. By this time, we were in April, maybe May.
Yeah.
And then from there we went up back northeast to another fire base. And I didn't particularly like being on the fire base because the VC knew where we were. When you're out in the recon platoon, they don't know where you are because you don't know where they are and they don't know where you are. But that's where they get the opportunity to lob those 122 rockets.
Right.
And so every place we went, we got rocketed pretty much.
Would you get mortar fire too, or most?
Mortar, yeah, oh yeah, mortar fire, yeah.
I think the closer you were to the DMZ, the more likely you were to be in trouble too.
Yeah, right, yeah. You didn't have too far to carry those rockets.
Okay. Now, was there less combat on the ground as you got farther into the year, or were things still pretty hot?
Oh yeah, it was hot. It was hot. Yeah. Because you see, after Tet, a lot of the VC and the NVA units pulled back, but they didn't disappear.
Right.
We had a battalion from the 82nd attached to us. Maybe a company. Anyway, they were out in our area of operation, and I was on the radio talking to the guy, one of the radio operators, and he said, we are receiving small arms fire, and all of a sudden he started yelling, they're coming out of a tunnel. And that was the last time I heard from him, So they lost a bunch of folks during that time. So the NVA didn't disappear. They just moved away and hid.
Because there was a lot of fighting in that year following the start of Tet.
Right. Oh yeah.
And
absolutely. Yeah.
So that all kept on going.
Yeah.
Now, did you have any close calls yourself?
Some dumb close calls. When I was still with the recon platoon, we were given instructions to go to a certain point up on the hill. There was a hospital, VC hospital up there. So we were making our way up the hill. Every now and then we would come up against a wooden, looked like an outhouse, but no entry. Totally closed all the way around, Because we were so close, I didn't want to blow it up. But that still puzzles me today, what it was. It was probably a storage place for weapons. But anyway, so we were making our way up to the mountain, up to the side of this hill to check out this hospital. We got there. On the way up, I'm walking behind 3 or 4 troops, and I see a M26 grenade, and it's our grenade. I pick it up and put it on my belt. Yeah, dumb. Put it on my belt, and I keep it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it could have been a booby trap.
Sure.
Very easily, and I would have been gone, and along with my radio operator, you know. But anyway, get to the hospital. Most of the patients were gone. Mm-hmm. The doctors, a couple of nurses there, and with the kids. Probably some people that lived in the local
mm-hmm.
area that was forced to work up there.
Right.
So that's about the only thing we found, and we destroyed the hut and the equipment that they had. And so our guys carried 3 or 4 kids on their shoulder back down the mountain and brought the women down and called in a helicopter and had them evacuated, mm-hmm. you know. Because what are you gonna do with them, you know? But that, you know, those are the kind of close calls, dumb calls. Right. At one point we were at a fire base, and the recon platoon that came up was gonna be resting a couple of days. The helicopter pad was down below, and it was dug out along the side of a hill where it would be flat where the helicopter landed. But so up here, you know, gets higher, and a bunch of recon platoon people were down there sitting, and I says to make sure you sit down, do not get up, you know, because when helicopters take off, sometimes they tilt, mm-hmm. you know, one way or the other. So one of the best recon platoon sergeants, a platoon squad leader we had, was sitting there. The helicopter take off, and it took his head right across the top. I called the helicopter back, and the medic got on helicopter with the kid, with the sergeant, and took him back. Before we got to the hospital, he was dead, of course. You know, that can happen. Right. So a lot of crazy accidents kill people. Okay. You know, well, you know, there's 500.
Talking about sort of different experiences in Vietnam. Now, I know at one point you got wounded. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. We were at, I was on the fire base at that time, and VC broke into the perimeter. And, you know, on the fire base, we have the artillery batteries mm-hmm. is located there, and the mortar platoon. Mortar platoon is located there, and we have a medical staff there. So all of a sudden, I'm sleeping, and we build our own little hooch mm-hmm. or bunker.
You're in a bunker, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sleeping with the company command of headquarters company is in the same hooch, and explosion starts going off, and I mean different locations. I jump up. You sleep with your shoes on, your weapons mm-hmm. right next to you. I jump up and I look out, and I see the colonel standing, staggering around, and where he was sleeping was covered. A pile of rocks, mm-hmm. keep from small on fire hitting him. But the VC had broken into the perimeter and apparently knew where he was. They threw grenades right on the tent, mm-hmm. you know, which is a little pup tent, and he got wounded. He was standing around staggering. I ran over and grabbed him and escorted him to the medical tent. And from there I go, they took care of him. From there I go check the perimeter, make sure mm-hmm. all the troops are okay. And I was leaving one position, talking to the guy. He was okay, no problem, hadn't seen anything. And go to the next place down. There's a guy laying on his back, and the medic was already there. Laying on his stomach rather. He was already back there, and he got bunch of shrapnel in his butt. And you know, and this I think the other guy came up walking up to the location and looked down. He said, I think he was a medic, and I know he said, "Oh my God." I said, "Get the hell away from here." I said, "You're gonna cause the guy to go into shock." I mean, blood was just oozing out, and you know, and so the medics were there taking care of him, and the mortars were firing off around the perimeter, outside of you know our perimeter. By this time, the VC had pulled back, and so I was making my way around to checking each position, and some small arm fire was coming up the hill, and also a grenade, and that's when I got injured in the cheek. And I thought, well, man, if it was a bullet, I'm glad I had my mouth open, you know? Because it came from on an angle like that. And anyway, so everything by this time, the spooky was up, dropping flares so we could see, you know, turn night into daylight. And the colonel was in the tent, and by the morning, and what do you call it? Miniguns were circling, firing all around. We sent out patrols the next day and found quite a few bodies. You know, the miniguns must have got them, you know. But the colonel didn't come back to the battalion because he was wounded. The next time I saw the colonel was in 1990 something, and he was introducing his wife to me. He says, and I think this is the guy that probably saved my life, you know. I said, no, you were okay. I said, I just made sure I got you to the medics, you know. But he was just the same guy that just got awarded the Medal of Honor for career in action, career war action, and back in the 5th Korean War. That was just awarded. He was upgraded from, you know.
Yeah, they're doing some of that now.
Yeah, yeah. So he's 95 now.
Okay, and what's his name?
Puckett, Colonel Puckett.
All right.
Ralph Puckett, I think his first name was Ralph. I didn't call him Ralph.
No,
you know?
you would not at that point. Okay, so, and I think you also at some point received a Bronze Star. What was that for?
That was after I even got back from Vietnam. I was at Fort Bragg by this time, you know, and they had a award ceremony, presented Bronze Star with the V device, and I guess the sergeant major from that action put me in, you know, I guess.
Yeah, that would make sense. All right. Now, as we move on in 68, you're getting close to a year in Vietnam. So under what circumstances do you leave, or how does that process work?
I was doing the whole time, I kept telling the colonel, asking the colonel, when could I go on R&R? I was thinking about having my wife meet me in Hawaii.
Right.
A lot of married guys were doing that. And he said, well, wait till the next end of the next operation gets started, you know, and that next operation gets started. So finally I says, Colonel, I'm going to take 3 or 4 days off and go down to Saigon, Da Nang rather. They had a China Beach down there. You could get a little hooch on the beach and spend time down there. But at the same time, my wife's brother was in the Marine Corps station in Da Nang. And I located him, and I met him and talked to him, and he says, oh, by the way, my mother is down in Georgia taking care of your kids. Says, Carol's in the hospital, you know. So I said, well, craps. I guess I better get back up to the unit. They've been probably trying to contact me. By the time I get back up there, the officer in the rear charge of the rear area said, when are you supposed to rotate? DEROS. I says, around the first week of July. He said, well, get your stuff together. We're going to send you out now, because it must have been around the 20th of June, or at least something like that. So I packed up. I had a couple I had a SKS weapon that I wanted to bring back, but in order to do that, you have to go to Saigon to get it approved to bring it back. So I said, forget about that, you know. So three days later, I was on the plane coming back to the good old U.S. of A. Went back down to Fort Benning, Georgia. My wife was out of the hospital by then. So I sent my mother-in-law on her way, and then I knew where I was going, to Fort Bragg. So we packed up and went to Fort Bragg. Before we left Fort Benning, I had this, she bought this trailer where you could fold it up to a single wide, right? So I had to get equipment to do that. I did that, contacted an outfit to move it to North Carolina. And we drove to North Carolina, and I got an assignment as the S2 sergeant at the 505 Infantry Brigade.
Or regiment.
Regiment, yeah, at that point, yeah. Anyway, so I stayed there and I went to Puerto Rico once or twice for training. And about a year later, I got orders to go to England.
Okay. And what was that assignment?
Well, that assignment was I was assigned to the Silk Purse Control Group, which was controlled by the UCOM, U.S. European Command, and which was in Stuttgart at the time. The headquarters was, but we were in England. And the purpose of that mission or that outfit was to provide a survivable command post for the U.S. military in Europe in case of a nuclear war. So we had 6 KC-135 aircraft, which was an old model of a Boeing 707. It had all the equipment that you need to communicate with anybody in the world, pretty much. And we had equipment on board where in case of a war, you needed to get down, not the aircraft itself, but we had cable that dropped down to a couple hundred feet off the ground where you could communicate through that cable to the military and the command, JCS, Joint Service Command. And so we did practice that once or twice, and each time you had to cut it before it could get back into the aircraft. And we also had guys, Air Force guy on board our aircraft, and I think each one of the aircraft, because you'd fly 8-hour flight time after you get level, flying level. You go X number of feet high, and you contact the aircraft that's already on station and relieve them, and you take charge of the operation from that point until 8 hours later, and another one would come. Sometimes, because we were in England, sometimes we couldn't land back in England because there's a lot of fog during a particular time of year. So we'd land in, at first we could land in Gaddafi. Where's Gaddafi from?
Libya.
Libya, yeah. We had a base in Libya we could land. We had a base in France we could land, but France kicked us out. So did Gaddafi.
Yeah.
So Scotland, we had a base in Scotland we could land. We had a base in Madrid, Spain. So we'd land in Madrid, Spain most of the time and spend the night and then take up our position the next day, whatever hour we started a new mission, started the next mission. And that lasted, let me see, I got there in 69 and we left in 72.
Okay.
And very enjoyable assignment.
Okay. I mean, did you have base schools there? Did your kids go to? Okay.
Yep. Kids had a school that they could attend. Just walk right down the street to the school. And
now, would you travel at all with your family or do any tourism, or just in England, or?
In England, let me see. No, we didn't, because my wife, all started her illness. She had a diagnosis, paranoid schizophrenic, you know. So she was in the hospital at Fort Bragg a couple of times, and we got to England, and she was in the hospital quite often. So at the point I had to get someone to come in to watch the kids when I'm off flying on duty, and so that was pretty hectic at times. And sometimes, you know, she'd stay in the hospital 3-4 weeks and then come home and be fine, and before you know it, things turn sour again. So, yeah, the kids went to school and did very well, met a lot of friends, acquaintance that they got to know, and enjoyed the stay. We didn't do much traveling. We did a lot of local traveling, local towns and that, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
Went to London to see Hair, and that was the first time I saw a crew on stage, a buck naked.
It's probably true for many people.
Yeah. I thought, what the heck?
Okay.
So we came back from England. I wanted to stay longer in England, but they said this was in '72, so the war was still going on in Vietnam. Says, well, no, you can't stay because you will probably be going back to Vietnam, you know. So I got an assignment before I got the assignment, they contacted me and said I wouldn't be going to Vietnam, but I was going to Michigan to work with the Michigan National Guard Advisory Group.
Okay.
And I spent 4 years doing that from '72 to '76. Okay. That meant going from Wisconsin to Indiana to Grayling, Michigan, anywhere where the National Guard was training, you know, particularly during the summer, you know, 2 weeks in Minnesota, Wisconsin, sometimes spend 6 weeks in Wisconsin because one unit would come for 2 weeks and the next one unit would come, you know. So the same thing with the Grayling, but it was close enough where I could come home, you know.
Right.
I was still living in the Selfridge Air Force Base in Mount Clemens area at the time.
All right. And that's the whole period. I mean, now Vietnam is really winding down.
Yeah,
actually
Vietnam was winding down. I didn't have to think about having to go back there, because when I was there, when I left Vietnam, I'd made up my mind that I wasn't going back. I had been in service 12 years when I went to Vietnam, and I decided if necessary, I'd give them my 12 years and get out, because it seemed to me that the Americans were doing most of the fighting, and the VC, I had interpreters with every company on the ground, and one time all of the interpreters all of a sudden showed up at the fire base, and I could see them getting off the helicopter. I go out, I said, what's going on? You can't be leaving your company. Wow, it's a holiday. We go home for the holiday. I said, get your butts back on that helicopter and get back out there with that unit. I said, all those guys out there, they would like to go home for the holiday too, you know. So they all reluctantly got back on the helicopter, you know.
Yeah. Did you have much contact with Vietnamese civilians?
No, not at all, pretty much. I visited a, what do you call it, massage parlor one time, and I said, I don't need to go back there. You know, they would give you a massage. They wanted to go more than a massage.
Right.
And I said, no, thank you. And that was the only contact I had with, I saw civilians walking down.
Right. Yeah, and there were the ones who were in the hospital that you had to remove and that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, did you have civilians who would work on any of the bases?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of civilians worked on base, laundry, barber shop, BX, you know. And when the Tet Offensive happened in not Tuiwai, but Phan Rang and a couple other bases, you know, when the Tet Offensive happened, they found most of them killed on the perimeter because they were working, but they were VC also. You know, and you can't tell.
Right.
You know, no background investigation take place.
Okay. So you have this assignment in Michigan. I mean, and that's your last assignment. At
That
what point?
was my last assignment.
How did you decide to leave the service, or were you told it was time to go?
Well, I was going to try to go back to Europe someplace. I said I'd like to get a call to the Pentagon, talk to my guy up there. I said I'd like to go back to Germany or England. You know, he said no problem, no problem. He promised me that I would be. This was in early
76 now.
Yeah, early '76. He said no problem. We'll have you there back by September. I said good, because I have kids still in school, and they need to get back in school in September if we're going to be moving. And about a month or two later, I get orders to go to Korea.
Oh.
And I called the guy back. I said, what's going on with this? I said, you said you're going to be able to get me back to Europe someplace. He said, well, we see you've never been to Korea, and you got to go to Korea before you can go back to Europe. I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. I've never been to Korea, and guess what? I'm not going. I'm going to retire. And that was the day that I made up my mind to retire. Now, I should have thought a little bit more about this, because I had 21 years and 5 months and a few days. If you go 21 years and 6 months and 1 day, you get additional money.
Okay.
You know, so I cut myself short by about a week or two. You know,
so once you left the service, then what did you do?
Well, I was going to take 6 months off and do nothing, you know. That lasted about 4 weeks. And moved to Holland, Michigan. My folks left Detroit in '62, '63, something like that, and moved to Holland. They had my dad bought about 26 acres of land and was out in the country farming and selling vegetables. Anyway, I decided we'd go over there to visit, and I decided that's where I would like to raise my kids, because I could have had a job just out of Mount Clemens, working for Ford Motor Company, and making good money, but that was too close to Detroit as far as I was concerned, because my kids had been kind of isolated their whole life, you know, living on military bases and not exposed to a lot of nonsense. So that's why I moved to Holland.
Okay.
And that's where all the kids graduate from high school.
Okay. Now, did you find a job there?
I did. I worked. Well, I decided I was going to do just about anything to keep busy. So I went to this outfit that take rolls of aluminum and make different stuff, you know. So I went over there, and I knew my wife knew the family. That was the lady was the secretary in that office. So I stopped there one day, and I says, I'd like to see about getting a job. I forget her name. She says, sure, no problem. Fill in, just put your name and phone number and address, and the personnel officer will call you. He called me and go in for the interview, and he asked me what I've been doing for all these years, you know. And I started talking about my military career and my service and my experience and what I did. And when I got to the point of the Airborne Command post in Germany, England, he was very interested in that. And the next day he called me and says, go see this doctor and get a physical, and you can start Monday, you know. He says, when I come back Monday, he wanted to see me. He says, and what do you have in mind for the future? I said, well, I'd like to take your job. But I worked there about 6 months, and maybe a little longer, and a prison opened up about 12 miles south, the Saugatuck area. You know, so I went down there and put in an application to work. I worked there for a couple of years. Well, 78 we got inmates in. In 79 I moved from there, went to Muskegon because I could get a promotion, but it was set as a temporary promotion. I thought, well, you know, temporary. When I get there, I'm going to make it a permanent promotion. They're going to have to hire me on a permanent basis once I work for a while, and they did, you know. And the next thing I knew, I make lieutenant and the shift commander, and I worked there for about 9 years, and I was outside during a snowstorm, and we had there was a guy running what we call the port, where trucks come through. We had to inspect them and go down underneath where you're looking, going to do an oil change to check for drugs. And I was down there. I started going down, and I hit a piece of ice, I guess, and slipped down and hurt my back, and ended up back surgery. And it never got much better, so they medically retired me. So I did Mr. Mom for 3 or 4 years until all the kids got out of high school, and that's my story.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the Army, are there other particular memories or things that stand out for you that you haven't talked about yet?
I'm sure there is some things that I didn't talk about that, but I can't think of anything.
Yeah, you'll remember them after we stop, because
I'm sure
that is how that works. Okay, but to think back on your time in the service, in what ways do you think that affected you, or what did you take out of it?
Well, I took out of it the fact that I think I can do just about anything I put my mind to. And I learned a lot about myself and about people, the behavior of people, you know. When I was still working at the prison, I went to school at night at I started at Muskegon Community College, got an associate degree at the community college, and then went from there to Grand Valley. In the meantime, I had been divorced, and so I was living up in the Muskegon area and driving to after associate degree at Muskegon, I went to Grand Valley. And a year or so later, I got married, remarried, and my wife lived in Holland, and I moved to Holland. And so I'd still working in Muskegon. I'd go to work 6 o'clock in the morning, get up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and go to Grand Valley and go to the library and study for 2-3 hours, and every now and then get a couple, maybe an hour's sleep, and go to class and get home at 10 o'clock at night, and get up the next morning and do it all over again. So I ended up with getting my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And all the inmates wanted to know, Sergeant, Lieutenant Johnson, why are you going to school? I said, so I can figure out what make you freaking idiots tick. So that you don't come back here, you know? But the recidivism rate was very high. You know, you send people out, and 3-4 weeks, sometime months later, there they are, right back. So I should tell guys that we're going to get out. I says, don't go back and hang out with the same crowd. I says, find a new place to live if possible. But don't hang out with, if you got to go back to the same town, don't hang out with the same people. Those are the people that got you here in the first place. But, you know, didn't help much.
You can't fix everything.
No, can't fix it. You know, they have to fix it themselves.
All right. Well, you've got a remarkable story, so I'd just like to thank you for coming in and sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much.